Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Denhart. I'm the Executive Director at the Coolidge Presidential Foundation up in Plymouth, Vermont. We're here today for a program to tell you about some of our programs and to encourage you to get involved. Joining me are several of my colleagues, but before I do that, a little bit of background about Calvin Coolidge is probably in order. President Coolidge was born, as you may know, in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, July 4th, 1872. He grew up here in Vermont, eventually went on to Massachusetts to attend Amherst College, became the governor of Massachusetts, eventually the vice president, and the president of the United States, the 30th president, serving from 1923 to 1929. At the Coolidge Foundation, we encourage people to visit the historic site here in Vermont and do programs both here in Vermont and around the country to educate more Americans about President Coolidge and the value of his legacy. But as I said, today we're here to talk about our programs, and especially several of our programs that we hope many Vermonters will get involved with. And so I'd like to open it up. I'm joined by several of my colleagues. First here, to my left is Rashad Thomas, our program and editorial associate, and Diane Kemble, our education director, and our program associate, Rob Hammer. So thank you for joining me, everybody, and thank you everyone for tuning in. First, I'd like to talk about our Calvin Prize for Vermont Youth, which is a writing prize, Diane, and could you tell our audience more about it?
Sure. Well, this is a great opportunity for students. This is the 5th year that we've done this contest, and it is open to all students age 13 through 19, all Vermont students, or if students go to school in Vermont. And we're very excited about this year's topic, which will really give Vermont students an opportunity to make their voices heard. As we know, this is a time of great political upheaval in our country, and we are encouraging students to look to Calvin Coolidge for some viewpoints of how to understand different people's outlook, and also how to use good skills to make their own voices heard. And we have a prize for this, so it's a $1,500 first prize and $500 runner-up prize. And but the important thing is that it will encourage students to really learn about Coolidge and to learn the lessons that he has to teach us. And we'll be talking about some of the resources. And but one thing is that it can be an essay, but it also can be a poem or even a song. Do we have a song in there? But it could be.
A song, but it could be a song.
We had somebody entered a rap at one time, but it can be an essay format or some other writing format. The specifics are on the website. They give all the details about it. But so using the inspiration from Calvin Coolidge to think about what could our unified vision be. And one place that students are encouraged to look, and this is on our website, but probably the autobiography of Calvin Coolidge is in your local library. If it's not, let us know and we'll send them one. But in his autobiography, in chapter 2, he talks about seeking an education. And since this program, this contest is open to students, I think that would be a good place for students to read maybe the part about him growing up in Plymouth Notch, but especially the chapter about seeking an education. And students could think about their own education, the skills that they are honing right now for their place in the world, and also to look back at what Calvin Coolidge had to say. He talks about learning that much stress was placed on a thorough mastery and careful analysis of all the arguments presented by the writers on any subject under consideration. Then it was certain that when it was certain that they were fully understood, they were criticized, so that what was unsound was rejected and what was true accepted. So he is talking then, and this is a lesson we can learn now as far as learning what arguments there are and how to talk about them, basically, and how to write about them. And students have until May to do this. but we'll be talking a little bit later about the step-by-step, and Rob will be filling in on that part when we get to that.
Exactly right. So the prompt title is, Could Coolidge Win Today? In this era where the media has changed so much, the way that people campaign has changed so much, could Coolidge win today? And what lessons can we learn from Coolidge's example that might help heal, as you said, some of our political divisions? As you said, the deadline is May 19th. And all the information is at coolidgefoundation.org. Rashad, you're going to tell us about some of the resources that students might use to research this topic, but I wonder if before you do that, before you dive right in, you might say, I mean, what are some of the lessons from Coolidge? He was known to be civil and to work across the aisle. I wonder if you might elaborate a little bit on that, and then tell us about what resources students can find to help them in this writing exercise.
Sure. Well, I think the real genius of Calvin Coolidge is that he had very strong values and principles that he stood up for, but he wasn't the type of person who saw all of those who disagreed with him as his enemies. And I think that, of course, in our political discourse today, we tend to view those we disagree with as not just wrong, but like evil and just beyond the pale in a way that I think is very dangerous for civil discourse and our ability to move forward together as one nation. So I think that's one of the main lessons that we can learn from Calvin Coolidge, is that it's very important to stand up for your values and your principles and to fight for what you believe in, but to do so in a way that breeds unity and furthers the common cause of our common Americanness, I suppose.
Do you think politics were just less severe back then, and that's why Coolidge was able to be civil while still achieving and staying true to his principles? Or can we get back to that?
No, I don't. I think we tend to look at the past with rose-colored glasses and assume that back in the day, things, because we have social media and television, all these sorts of things, that people were somehow better, 100 years ago or whatever. That's not the case. I mean, politics was just as hard-nosed.
Forget that there were duels back among
right. Yeah, fathers, like right? Absolutely. Like Alexander Hamilton died in a duel. Like that's nothing new. But I think what President Coolidge teaches us is that that stuff is always going to be with us, but we should always fight for on a higher plane, a better way of doing politics. And Coolidge teaches us that when we do that, the people reward us. Well, they rewarded him in his long political career, and he ran for many offices throughout his 30 years in public life. Everything, he started on the town council and then ended up all the way at the presidency. But the only race he lost, which was for the school board in Northampton, was a race in which he says in his autobiography he focused more on the deficiencies of his opponent than on what he himself was trying to do for his constituents. So he took that lesson to heart, and he never spoke a bad word about his opponents in all the races that he ran after that. So that's a very important lesson, I think.
We need leaders who help set the tone for
absolutely,
the rest of us to follow.
Absolutely.
Great. So speaking of the autobiography, what are some of the resources? I know Diane's mentioned the autobiography, and you. What else might be in there that students will find that gives them some clues about answering our prompt, the lessons from Coolidge on this issue of civility and unity?
Sure.
And what other resources are available for students to use?
Well, I have to shoot the horn of the Coolidge Foundation website, because we have just a vast array of resources available at coolidgefoundation.org. Everything from President Coolidge's speeches from very early in his life when he was in college, all the way up to when he became president. So that's a very good source of information about President Coolidge. Also, of course, in addition to the autobiography, on our website there's a shorter biography of President Coolidge that you can you can read, as well as of his wife Grace Coolidge, and then you can go. I think another good source, since we live thankfully in the 21st century, is YouTube. There are a lot of good videos out there featuring. Some of them featuring our chairman, Amity Schlaze.
Some with you.
Some with me. Talking very in depth about President Coolidge's life and what he did while he was in office, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. And of course, we want people to go to the library as well. So I'm sure your public library will have lots of books about President Coolidge and Amity Schlaze's biography, Coolidge, and things like that. So there's a lot out there that's available for you to peruse about President Coolidge's life.
Fantastic.
And one of the resources is Governor Jim Douglas's talk that's on,
oh, right,
on
yes.
our website.
Mm-hmm.
And being the former governor of Vermont and being a Coolidge person,
Mm-hmm.
he has a very good talk on there, which is about civility, actually.
Right.
And would be a good resource for students to
He's done some of the
look at.
homework for them, hasn't he?
He has done some of it, and it's good because the information is presented in different ways. So
Right.
here he's this down-to-earth kind of talk, someone who we're familiar with, and then the autobiography and the YouTube.
Very good.
Very good.
Right. You can find all that again at coolidgefoundation.org. So Rob, I turn to you now. Rob has just recently joined the Coolidge Foundation full-time, so he's fresh out of college and maybe more used to writing research papers than the three of us. How do you get started on something like this? Do you have any advice for students? Sometimes the hardest thing is just getting your outline done or the first words down on paper. What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I think that is one of the most challenging parts of writing any kind of big writing project is just getting started. And Rashad listed all these great resources. So you've gone through, you've looked at all these resources, but then what do you do? How do you organize that? And personally, I think the best way to do that is with an outline, because not only do you start to get your pen on your paper and start to put some ideas down. But it also really helps organize your thoughts. Sometimes it'll kind of change the way that you decide you want to, write the essay as you're doing the outline. So that kind of begs the obvious question: well, how do you start an outline? So I think the most important thing when you're starting to write an outline is to come up with a thesis statement. Decide what what you're trying to say. And then, list some supporting facts for that. So, for instance, with our prompt, could Coolidge win today? Your thesis statement will, either be yes, he could, or yes, he couldn't, or no, he couldn't. And then you want to list a couple reasons why. And then each one of those reasons should sort of be their own part of the outline, their own, paragraph. I don't know what is the word count for the
800 words.
800 words.
Right, so it's not actually that long of an assignment either. Yeah, and it can be shorter. That's just the maximum number of words.
Right.
Right. So you'd probably want to keep it to several paragraphs, and probably each one of those paragraphs should be a point reinforcing your thesis statement.
Right. And again, though, as Diane mentioned, it can be creative writing too. We find some students are much more creative than I am. that write rap lyrics or a poem or something like that. So students shouldn't feel boxed in, but I think most students do write a typical essay, and Rob, your advice is very good.
Yeah, and I think even with the maybe more unconventional styles, with writing a poem or something, even an outline in that case can come in handy. Yeah. It'll just take a slightly different form than an outline for kind of a more formal essay.
We're on the lookout for the Coolidge version of Hamilton. So
I
anyone out there,
was just going to say that Hamilton has really inspired students to write
Just to make sure our audience knows,
history.
we're talking about Hamilton, the Broadway musical
Yes.
by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yeah.
But it really has inspired students to do writing, all different kinds of writing about historical figures. And now, as a parent, and my children are well grown now, I would like to chime in and say, don't wait to the last minute. To plant the idea to start some reading and to read over the directions a few times, so to make sure that what you're working on, and our directions are very broad, so they have lots of possibilities, but don't leave it until May to do it, and because I think the longer that students think about this, the longer those ideas will just keep coming and developing and be put together in a really unique and wonderful way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, the Calvin Prize deadline is May 19th. It's open to Vermont students, those who live in Vermont or come here for school in Vermont. The first place prize is $1,500. Second place prize is $500. So it's well worth your time. And often the top several essays get published in the Rutland Herald so that people around the state can read it.
And on our website.
And on our website. So please do visit coolidgefoundation.org to learn more and to submit your own essay. Great. I'd like to turn a little bit now, Diane, and talk, at least for a minute or two, about our history exploration programs. You know, through your leadership, hundreds of students come to visit Plymouth Notch when it opens in the spring. And I know many teachers might be watching. Can you explain you know, how that works and how they might be able to come and experience Plymouth Notch?
Yes. Well, as I'm sure most people are aware, that the site is fully open only during the warmer months. So the buildings are kind of put to bed in the winter. So students can come May through October when the site is fully open. But also now with this wonderful museum, I keep saying new museum, but it's actually 5 years old now, we can really take groups all year round. And we just had one not too long ago. And so students can come, teachers can bring their students. We can do a presentation for them where we are very versatile. And I always ask what kind of things that the students have been studying so we can make connections to that. It might be political cartoons, it might be campaigns, voting, civil rights, and all related to Coolidge's story. And so we have this wonderful museum they can visit. We can walk through the village. We can do a special activity. They can visit
the cheese factory.
Cheese factory, which is always a favorite. So we can do that all year round. And we're also flexible that if the weather is bad, we'll reschedule. And so we really would love for people to consider coming all year round. And this isn't just students in school. It can be groups. We've had retired teacher organizations. We've had a book group that read a book on Grace Coolidge and wanted to come visit. And
4-H and Okemo Mountain School.
That's right, Okemo Mountain School. And so we even, if we know the area of interest ahead of time, when the Grace Coolidge group came, we even got some artifacts out of our vault, and we're able to see Grace Coolidge's high school yearbook and things like that. So we would love to have people visit. And this is students in schools, as I said, groups, but also we've started to have more homeschool groups come, all ages. Sometimes we have from really tiny kids all the way up through high school. We have volunteers, so we can break the groups into smaller groups that are age appropriate. So we're ready to do that. We've had camps come and 4-H scouts, as well as the classroom groups. And I'll make a pitch now if anyone out there is interested in being a volunteer. And many of our volunteers are former teachers, but you don't have to be. As long as you like working with people, like working with students, and enjoy history, then just contact me and we'll meet and talk. And we have meetings, we have training meetings, you're giving them materials, and also you can shadow a docent who's been there and see how we do things.
Right, our volunteer docents who play such an important role.
They really,
working
really
with the students, giving them a tour around the historic site.
Yes.
And as you say, we're always looking for more of them.
Yes, and it allows our groups to be small too. So if you do come with a group of 20 or 25, we break them up into 3 or 4 smaller groups so that students really have a chance to see things, and parents as well. You can see the light bulb go off with the parents when they accompany their students on the group.
And grandparents sometimes
and
too.
Grandparents, yes, yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Diane. Another of our big programs, of course, is the Coolidge Scholarship, which is open to Vermont students. It's also open nationwide. Rob, will you tell our audience about the Coolidge Scholarship and how Vermont students can get involved or apply for that as well?
So the Coolidge Scholarship, this is our second year. We're a full ride scholarship. And what's kind of unique about the Coolidge Scholarship is the winner of the scholarship can use it at any accredited U.S. university.
And it's for undergraduate study.
Correct, yeah, undergraduate study. So students apply in their junior year of high school. That way, we do that so that they can then, look at colleges, knowing that they, have a full ride, and hopefully that'll, positively influence which colleges they, decide to apply to. Beyond that, the only other eligibility requirement is that they are a U.S. Citizen or legal permanent resident. The application's online. We take all the applications online at www.coolidgescholars.org.
So that is a different website, just so everyone's clear, from where you'll find the Calvin Prize info at coolidgefoundation.org. This is coolidgescholars.org.
And so a little bit about the application itself. The first part of it is, kind of basic contact information. And we also ask the students to list 2 references, to provide letters of reference. And then the second part of the application is more academically focused. We ask for GPA, class rank, college entrance test exam scores. So, all that's pretty straightforward. What will take, a little bit more work on the applicant's part, we do ask that they submit a resume and a transcript. And then we do have 2 essay questions, which are an important part of the application. And in one of those essay questions, we ask that the students read the autobiography of Calvin Coolidge.
People can tell we're a big fan of that particular book.
And it is very readable.
Right, it is. It sounds like it's a lot,
Yeah.
but Calvin Coolidge was kind of known for being brief, and his autobiography is very easy to read, and I don't know, it's probably about
247 pages.
Right. There you go.
And in fact, we know that you can read it in the entire afternoon because on the 4th of July every year, Rashad and Diane organize a community reading out loud of the entire book where we read the entire autobiography from start to finish in one afternoon. So we know that students can certainly read it. They might go at a slightly slower pace, but it's very readable, as Diane
I read
says.
faster when I don't have to say it out loud.
Good
so
point.
you probably
Right.
read it even quicker
Right.
than in one afternoon.
So yeah, if you know any, if you are a high school junior or any high school juniors who you think would be interested in applying, again, they can apply at www.coolidgescholars.org.
Yeah, great. And the application deadline is
February 22nd.
February 22nd. And they do need to remember they have to get 2 letters of recommendation. And there's quite a bit of work to apply because this is a very generous award, right? 4 years, full ride, room and board, tuition, stipend for books, and they can take it to whatever college they get into. So,
But only to juniors.
And only if you're a current high school junior.
Yes.
And it is open nationwide, but Coolidge is from here, and we certainly hope that a lot of Vermont students will give it a look and consider applying as well.
And Coolidge went to high school right here in Ludlow.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, we're
The Black
sitting
River
here. Right,
Academy.
exactly. We're sitting, for anyone who doesn't know,
Yeah.
we're at Ludlow Public Television, and Coolidge went to school just right up the road. Great. All right, great. Finally, thanks, Rob. I want to turn back to you, Rashad, and we have a program coming up actually on President's Day.
Yes.
And it will be entitled Opening the Door of Hope, The Untold Story of Coolidge and Civil Rights. Will be open from noon to 4, and people can come and see the museum, which normally is not open this time of year, so it's a special day. But at 2 o'clock, you'll give this talk on Coolidge and Civil Rights. So could you maybe give us a little bit of a preview and tell people what is that untold story? At least a little bit of it. I know they have to come to your lecture to hear the rest.
Sure. Well, people would be surprised to hear that President Coolidge did anything related to civil rights because, sadly, most people have very little knowledge of President Coolidge and his substantive accomplishments. But in the 1920s, he made a number of very significant moves to improve the situation of African Americans in the country. And the situation at the time was very very bleak in many respects because of segregation and the problem of lynching and that sort of thing. But he proposed an anti-lynching law in his first State of the Union address in 1923. And he also did some other symbolic gestures that were very, pushing the envelope, I suppose, or they made bold statements for the time. Like, for instance, he went to Howard University, which is a historically black college in Washington, D.C., and gave a commencement address in June of 1924, which
would have been unheard of in those days.
Right. And that was going into his election campaign for the 1924 general election. So, like, stirring that pot at that time would have been really,
Bold.
courageous and bold. Yeah. So those are just a few things that President Coolidge did. He also played a role in one of the last things he did coming out of the door in 1929, on the day that Herbert Hoover took over, was to sign a law starting a national memorial to the Negro that unfortunately wasn't able to be accomplished because of the Great Depression. But historians look back on that as sort of the first step to the creation of the newest Smithsonian Museum that just opened last fall, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So, President Coolidge's legacy is still paying dividends all the way to this very day. So I'm going to talk about all of that. I'm going to talk about the context of the 1920s and the way race relations worked at that time, and the way that President Coolidge really swam against the tide of the era with regard to his views about civil rights and about race.
It is amazing, typically when we think of the civil rights movement, I think, justifiably we normally think of the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's amazing to think that, some 4 decades earlier, Coolidge was already kind of planting those seeds.
Right.
Or opening the door of hope is
Right.
is the title of your talk.
There's a really great image that's in our latest Coolidge Quarterly, which has a couple of articles about President Coolidge's civil rights connections. It was put out by the Harding campaign in 1920, and it has President Abraham Lincoln standing over Harding and Coolidge, sort of like in benediction, like it's they're the heirs of Lincoln, because Lincoln freed the slaves and everything, and won the Civil War. So it's like a passing of the baton. I really love that. You can find that on the Library of Congress website as well. It's just a great image.
I know, that's one of your favorites. I like it too. Yeah. And it also shows, how the work of building the country passes on.
Right.
Through, you can't achieve everything at once, but as Coolidge says, you can do something
right.
At once or right now. So, very good. So, we hope everyone will come on President's Day itself. We'll be open from noon to 4. Rashad's talk will be at 2 p.m. on Coolidge and the Untold Story of Civil Rights. So please do come and join us right in Plymouth Notch. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining me and talking about some of our programs. Again, we hope people will find us online. Most of our programs you can find out about at coolidgefoundation.org. As Rob said, our scholarship information is at coolidgescholars.org. And we love seeing everyone here in the Vermont community taking part in our programs. We have things going on throughout the year, so please do check us out online and come visit us in Plymouth Notch. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.